People assume the wealthy are born into palaces, not poverty, that their silver spoons were heirlooms, not metaphors. But my story didn't begin in a penthouse. It began in a cramped, leaky basement apartment above a pawn shop in Detroit. I was nobody, just a kid with dreams too big for my zip code. By the time I turned 33, I had built a company valued at over $200 million. But this isn't about balance sheets or boardrooms. This story, my story, really started one rainy Tuesday morning when I walked into a dusty little diner on the outskirts of Cleveland, looking like just another tired traveler. I had come to town under the radar, scouting locations for a new logistics hub my company was secretly planning. I wore a ball cap and a weathered jacket, deliberately understated. I didn't want attention. I just wanted a hot coffee, some peace, and maybe 5 minutes to read the local papers without being recognized. That's when I saw her. She moved through the narrow aisles like a whisper, balancing plates and coffees with an elegance that made the chaos seem choreographed. There was something in her posture, straight, determined, but weighed down, that felt familiar. I noticed the worn soles of her shoes, the way she apologized too much, smiled too rarely, and checked the clock like every second meant something. Life had made her tired, but it hadn't broken her. Not yet. She brought me my coffee, flashed a polite half-smile, and turned to rush off. Before she did, I looked up and said, "Thanks. That's the first good coffee I've had all week." Her eyes met mine, just for a moment. And that's when I saw it. A flicker of surprise, then gratitude. Maybe she wasn't used to being seen. Her name was Lila. I didn't know her name then. Not until the third time I came in and saw her again. Same uniform, same quiet strength. The diner was nearly empty, and she refilled my cup with a soft laugh. "Back again?" she asked. "Can't stay away from the coffee," I smiled. She rolled her eyes, but this time there was playfulness behind them. "It's instant." "Then I must be here for something else." She looked at me then, really looked, and blushed. That was the first spark. I kept coming back for 2 weeks. I came to that diner every morning. She worked the opening shift, which meant she was already there by 5 a.m., smiling through exhaustion, juggling tips and trays with grace. I never gave her my full name. Just Ben. And she never asked what I did. I liked that. The truth was, I was used to people changing the moment they found out I was the founder of Everest Logistics. One Google search, and people would either fake admiration or pitch me startup ideas over soup. But Lila never Googled me. She just knew me as Ben, the quiet guy who liked his eggs scrambled and his coffee black. She didn't know I was building a company with over 3,000 employees. She didn't know that I flew to 4 cities a week, or that my suitcases were worth more than most people's rent. She just saw me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. The receipt that changed everything, it was a Friday. I was supposed to catch a flight to Chicago in 3 hours, but something made me stay longer at the diner. Lila seemed more distracted than usual. Her eyes were red. She kept checking her phone. Finally, I asked, "Everything okay?" She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just one of those days." She handed me my check. I slipped cash between the pages and left, as I always did. But when I got back to my rental car and opened the bill out of habit, something fell into my lap. It was a note, written on the back of the receipt. This is probably wildly unprofessional, but if I don't say it, I'll regret it. I think, "You're sweet, and maybe kind of handsome. Even if you're always buried in that newspaper. If you're ever interested in grabbing coffee outside the diner. Lila." I stared at the words, stunned. 100 board meetings hadn't made my heart race like that. I didn't know what to say, or if I even could say something. I wasn't just Ben. I was Benjamin Hale, CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech logistics firms in the country. The second I told her, she might never look at me the same way again, but I knew one thing: I had to see her again. The call that almost changed nothing. I almost chickened out. I sat in my car for a full hour, dialing her number, then hanging up before it rang. I wasn't scared of rejection. I'd faced down venture capitalists, billion-dollar deals, government regulations. But Lila? Lila was real, and I hadn't been real in a long time. I finally sent her a simple text. "I'd love to have coffee with you. I don't think it's unprofessional at all." She responded within a minute. "Tomorrow? My shift ends at noon." I cancelled my flight. Big coffee. That became a catalyst. We sat at a park bench, sipping coffee that neither of us finished. She told me about her life, how she had put her nursing degree on hold to take care of her mother, how she worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, how she still believed, somehow, that better days were coming. I told her bits of my past, too. I told her how I was raised by a single mother who worked as a janitor, how I used to sleep with my textbooks in bed, thinking if I studied hard enough, I could change our lives. I didn't tell her what I did now. Not yet. I wanted more time, more trust. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You know, you have this calmness about you, like someone who's figured life out. But your eyes say otherwise. They look heavy, like you carry too much." She saw right through me, and I knew then I didn't want to lie anymore. The beginning of the truth that evening, I sent her a message. "Before we meet again, there's something you should know." I invited her to dinner the next night, at a quiet rooftop restaurant I owned under an alias. When she arrived, she looked nervous but hopeful. "I'm not who you think I am," I began. "I didn't lie to you, but I didn't tell you everything." Either. I told her the truth, about Everest logistics, about the private jets, the wealth, the public scrutiny, the sleepless nights building a company from the back of a shared office with no heating. Her eyes widened. Her hand trembled as she set down her water glass. And then slowly, she smiled. "So, you're saying I confessed my crush to a CEO on a napkin?" "Receipt," I corrected with a grin. "And yes," Lila laughed, a laugh so honest it echoed across the empty rooftop. "Well," she said, "I guess you'd better not forget me when you're rich and famous." I leaned closer. "Too late, you already made sure of that." Lila didn't run when I told her the truth. She didn't look impressed. She didn't ask how many houses I owned or if I could fly her to Paris. She just sat there, taking it all in. Then she asked one question that no one had ever dared. "Are you happy?" The rooftop faded around us. For the first time in a long while, I stopped thinking like a businessman. I wasn't in a meeting or a deal. I wasn't pitching or negotiating. I was just human and vulnerable. "No," I admitted. "Not really." She nodded, like she already knew. A past not meant to be perfect. Over the next few weeks, our coffee meetups became dinners. Our conversations moved from surface smiles to soul-deep honesty. She told me stories about her father, a mechanic who worked his whole life but never made it out of debt. He used to say, "Rich in heart beats rich in wallet." She said she never quite believed him, until now. I introduced her to the world I had carefully protected. First, I flew her to Chicago. In my jet, but not before warning her. "You might hate this part of me," I said. "It's loud, overwhelming, sometimes fake." She looked out the window at the city skyline and said, "Maybe I'll love the real you more than the noise." I brought her to a gala, my first date with her in public. I watched her move through crowds of billionaires and executives with quiet confidence, even when she was wearing a second-hand dress. They asked her what she did. She said proudly, "I'm a waitress at Carol's Diner, but I'm also someone who listens." She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't, and for that, I loved her more. The test of real intentions. A few months in, I did what I always swore I wouldn't. I offered her money. It wasn't some flashy gift, no diamond necklaces or designer bags, just a check, a large one, enough to pay off her mother's medical bills, enough to restart her education, enough to take a breath. She stared at it for a long time. Then she folded the paper, set it back on the table, and slid it across to me. "I don't want this," she said quietly. "Not like this." "Why?" "Because I need to know I'm enough, Ben. That I'm not part of your life because you pity me, or because it's some project. I want to stand beside you, not behind you." I had never felt so called out, and so respected. Lila didn't just challenge me to be better. She inspired me to go deeper. The fire in the foundation. That night, I went home and pulled out the old notebook, where I used to sketch ideas back in my garage startup days. I flipped through pages filled with dreams. Written in shaky handwriting, Lila's words echoed in my mind. "I want to stand beside you." And I realized something. I had created a billion-dollar company, yes, but I had never built something with someone else. Every partnership I'd had was transactional, strategic, based on metrics. Lila was none of those things. She was principle. She was purpose. And suddenly I knew exactly how I wanted to build my future, with her beside me. I asked for her ideas, not her hand. One afternoon, we sat in the park where we had shared our first real conversation. I pulled out my tablet and turned the screen toward her. "I'm working on something," I said. "A new division under Everest. It's about empowering small-town businesses, distribution centers, rural logistics, local markets." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds smart." I hesitated, then added, "I want you to help me build it. Not as a face, as a partner." She blinked. "Ben, I'm not a businesswoman. I'm not trained. I've never, but you understand people. Struggle, grit, and that's exactly what this needs. You've lived what we're trying to fix. That's more valuable than any MBA." Her eyes softened. "Let me think about it," she whispered. I smiled. "Take your time." Rebuilding the dream, brick by brick. Lila eventually agreed, on one condition. "I want to earn my seat," she said. "No favors." We structured a modest advisory role. She started with interviews, talking to local vendors, small-town store owners, waitresses, janitors, farmers, the people who made the economy run but never made the headlines. She listened. She collected stories. She brought them to the boardroom. Our executives didn't know what to make of her at first. Some scoffed, others tolerated. But as the numbers came in, customer retention, satisfaction, localized growth, they began to listen. By the end of the quarter, Lila's suggestions had increased rural partnership success by 18%. She wasn't just enough. She was the edge we didn't know we needed. A moment of almost collapse. Success doesn't always arrive peacefully. With Lila gaining influence, rumors began swirling. Tabloids picked up on our relationship. Headlines flashed. Waitress turned executive. Cinderella story or CEO's plaything. I was furious. She was heartbroken. One night she knocked on my penthouse door with tears streaking her cheeks. "I didn't ask for this," she said, voice shaking. "I just wanted to build something. I never wanted the spotlight." I held her, guilt knotting in my stomach. "I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." But then she looked up, defiant, through the pain. "No, I'm not running. I just need you to walk this with me every step." And we did. The turning point 3 months later, Lila stood on stage at a logistics summit, presenting a new model for sustainable rural distribution that she had co-designed. She wasn't nervous. She was electric. The room gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, one of my oldest investors pulled me aside and said, "She's the smartest person in this building." "You're lucky," I smiled. "I know, but it wasn't about luck. It was about seeing someone when they think they're invisible. About building together, not just dreaming alone. About giving without owning, and loving without trying to fix." The gift She never expected that Christmas I didn't buy her jewelry, or cars, or even a vacation. Instead, I handed her a worn, leather-bound notebook, the one where I'd first scribbled Everest's earliest ideas. Inside the cover, I had written, "You gave me back the part of me I forgot, the dreamer, the listener, the builder. You reminded me that even a CEO can still learn how to love again and build a life worth more than money. I don't want you beside me because I'm rich. I want you there because we make each other richer in ways that can't be counted. Let's build the next chapter together." Her hands trembled as she read it, and then, with tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Yes." I hadn't proposed yet, but somehow I knew she'd say yes to that too. Success has a way of drawing attention, not always the kind you want. By the end of the fiscal year, Everest's new rural division, powered by Lila's insights, was making headlines across every major outlet. Our supply chain model had become a case study at Stanford. We were winning awards, and yet, as her spotlight grew, so did the shadows. I was in Singapore when the first call came from our PR head. "Ben, we have a situation." A former employee, a disgruntled junior consultant, had leaked photos of Lila and me at a private dinner. Alongside them, he claimed Lila had only received her role at Everest because of a romantic relationship with me. He went on to allege favoritism, lack of qualifications, and backroom deals. The media didn't hesitate. By morning, she was trending, not as a visionary, not as a leader, but as the waitress who slept her way to the boardroom. It made me physically sick. Lila disappeared, I canceled everything and flew home. But by the time I landed, Lila was gone. She had turned off her phone, vacated her apartment, and sent in a formal request for leave, effective immediately. The only person she spoke to was our HR director, who told me, "She just kept saying she didn't want to be a distraction." I hadn't felt that helpless in years. My team offered to launch a counter-campaign. We had lawyers, we had media consultants. We could crush the false narratives. I could have bought every front page and painted her as the hero she truly was. But that's not what Lila wanted. She didn't need a white knight. She needed to stand on her own. So I waited. 2 weeks later, she called me from a payphone. Her voice was steady but distant. "I'm at my mother's. Needed time." "I understand," I said, trying to stay calm. "But please, come back. Let me explain to the board, to the world. I don't want your rescue, Ben. I want respect. And I don't know if I can earn that while being with you." That hit harder than anything else ever had. "Do you want to end this?" I asked, afraid of the answer. Silence. Then, "I don't know. I just know I'm tired of fighting a war I never started. The battle I had to fight alone. Lila had given me time, patience, and truth. Now it was my turn. I called an emergency press conference, not to defend myself, but to honor her. I read a statement I wrote alone, on the plane back. "Lila Rose is not just my partner in life. She's the architect behind one of our company's most effective strategic pivots. She earned her position with brilliance, not by proximity. If Everest Logistics stands for anything, let it stand for recognizing value, no matter where it comes from, even if it walks into a boardroom in a waitress uniform." The room fell silent. The next day, the narrative shifted. She came back, but on her own terms, 3 days after the conference, she showed up at our office, hair tied back, no makeup, simple blazer. She walked into the boardroom and spoke. "I don't want apologies. I want clarity. If anyone here thinks I'm only valuable because of Ben, say it now, and I'll walk away, for good." No one said a word. She stayed, and that was the day the board made her Director of Community Integration, a newly formed position, answerable only to the CEO, me. But she didn't thank me for it. She earned it, and I had never been prouder. Rebuilding. Trust, one honest conversation at a time. We didn't jump back into romance right away. We worked together, professionally, cordially. But every time our hands brushed, every time we laughed in sync at the same dry joke in a late-night meeting, I felt it. The bond wasn't broken, just bruised. It was during a staff retreat in Montana, a program she had developed for employee wellness, that we finally exhaled. After dinner, we stayed by the fire pit while the others trickled off. She looked at me, vulnerable, but stronger. You really fought for me. I'll keep doing it, I promised. Then she whispered the words that healed everything. You never saw me as small. That's why I fell for you. And I still do. The proposal that wasn't just for her. 3 weeks later, I took her back, to the same rooftop, where we'd had our first real dinner. But this time I didn't bring champagne or a photographer. I brought an empty chair. I handed her a sleek black folder. Inside was a legal document. I want you to be co-founder of the rural division, not just in title, in equity. 50%. This is your legacy too. Her hands trembled. Ben, I don't even know what to say. You say yes, I said, dropping to one knee. And then we build the next version of Everest. Together. Her eyes filled with tears. Then without hesitation. Yes. Celebrated by the people, not the headlines. We kept the wedding small. Not because we didn't want the world to know, but because the people who mattered already did. The chefs from Carol's Diner were there. Her mother, my old mentor, half the logistics staff from rural Indiana. And yes, even the janitor from my first office rental. The vows were simple. We promised not to save each other, but to keep each other grounded, to challenge, not just cheer, to love, not for what we were, but who we kept becoming, together but not dependent. To this day, people ask her how it feels to be married to a billionaire. She always laughs. I wasn't drawn to his money. I was drawn to his silence, because in it I heard honesty. She still goes back to Carol's Diner sometimes. Not to work, but to remember. And when young waitresses ask how she went from table service to the C-suite, she tells them the truth. It started with kindness, and coffee, and a little note I was terrified to leave. The media eventually moved on. New stories rose, new scandals erupted. Our love story faded from the front pages, but it never faded from the people who mattered. Lila and I didn't want to be a power couple. We wanted to be a purpose couple. And so, we built something bigger than either of us had imagined. We called it the Ground Up Initiative, a global platform for discovering, mentoring, and funding talent from unexpected places. Diners, farms, street vendors, janitors, nursing aides, single parents, immigrants. We didn't just write checks. We created programs that taught them how to lead, how to invest, how to build generational wealth. It started with one truth. Sometimes, the most brilliant minds wear aprons, not Armani. She led the movement, I just helped build the stage. Lila became the face of the movement, not because she wanted the spotlight, but because her story lit a fire. When she spoke at conferences, CEOs leaned forward. When she visited schools, girls whispered about becoming like her. I watched her become a force, not just of intellect, but of invitation. She never told people to dream bigger. She showed them how to dream closer to who they already were, closer to where they already stood, closer to what they already had inside them. The letter that changed everything. One day, a handwritten letter arrived at our foundation office. The return address? Carol's Diner. It was from Maria, one of the newer waitresses who'd once worked alongside Lila. It read, I was afraid to say anything, but I remember watching you, Lila, the way you carried plates and hope at the same time. The day you left, I cried, not because I was jealous, but because you gave me permission to want more. I enrolled in community college that fall. Next week, I start an internship at a logistics firm. You don't know me, but I've never forgotten. The day you left me a sticky note. You're stronger than you know. You were right. We both cried when we read it. That letter mattered more than any billion-dollar valuation. The surprise gift she gave me for my 40th birthday, Lila handed me a single envelope. Inside was a photo. Grainy, black and white. Clearly old. It was me, years ago, sitting in that tiny garage, hair messy, scribbling plans on the wall. She had found it through my old landlord. On the back, she'd written, "This man had everything he needed to become who he was meant to be. He just hadn't met the mirror yet. Thank you for letting me reflect the best parts of you." That moment hit me harder than my first million, because she saw me, not the polished CEO, not the founder, just me, Dada, the strangers who became family. Over the years, the Ground Up initiative expanded to 5 countries. Our alumni included a former refugee-turned-fashion designer, a deaf pastry chef who opened 3 bakeries, and a janitor who created an eco-cleaning product now sold in 300 stores. They didn't see Lila as their savior. They saw her as their mirror. Someone who had once struggled just like them, who still chose humility over hype, who still wore her old name tag on her office wall, framed like a trophy. The day we returned to Carol's diner, it had been 7 years. The neighborhood looked different, more vibrant, safer. But Carol's diner remained a small beacon of warmth on the corner. We went inside quietly, no fanfare. Maria spotted us. Her eyes widened. She ran up, laughing and crying at once. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She owned the place. "I bought it last year," she beamed. "First thing I did was put a plaque on booth 3. I turned. Sure enough, a small brass sign read, "This booth changed lives. One receipt at a time." Lila covered her mouth in disbelief. And for a long moment, we just sat there, holding hands across that same scratched-up table where it all began. Why I tell this story sometimes. People ask why I share all of this, why expose the vulnerable parts of my journey, the failures, the fear, the loneliness. The truth is, because I was never the real success story. Lila was. She was the one who made a man in a suit remember what it means to care before you calculate, to see before you scale, to love before you lead. And she did it not with a business plan or a billion-dollar strategy, but with a pen on a receipt. Legacy is not wealth, it's impact. We now live on a small ranch outside Denver. Yes, we still run Everest. Yes, we're still building, still growing. But our greatest joy is Sunday mornings, coffee in hand, reading stories from our scholarship recipients. Kids who were told no by everyone, except us, except themselves. And when those stories get tough, when the numbers drop, when markets shift, when stress creeps in, I remind myself, this all began because one woman was brave enough to write 6 words, "You're my favorite part of today." She had no idea those words would change her future, but they changed mine too, forever.